All right, we are here with another round the world of Web3 with myself, Travis Wright, Donald Lim, doing something new on the YouTube channel, going longer form so that we can go a little deeper on some of the things that we've each gone through this week, and hopefully they can resonate with you as you go through your week in Web3 of discovery and execution. Travis, Donald, great to see you.
Hi.
Nice to see you. Dude, you've had a whirlwind tour this week, Mr. Snook. It seemed like I remember I said, you're like, oh, dude, I'm in Arizona. And then you're like, oh, dude, I'm in LA. Oh, dude, I'm in Consensus in Austin. Oh, dude, I'm back in, I don't even know where the hell you are. It looks like you're back in your office now. So I guess you're back in
I'm definitely
the Scottsdale
back.
area.
I'm the first in, last out, but first in the office today. It's but early, so that's good for me. Yeah, my eyes are somewhat open. Anyway, it was. I
gotta tell you guys this. I don't know how Chris somehow makes it early for me, and I'm in Puerto Rico. I'm like way over East Coast, and somehow this Pacific Coast guy still tends to find a way to make it early for me. So I don't know how the hell he's doing that, but it's weird.
We're trying to not make it too late for Donald. That's the reason. Is we don't want Donald to be staying up too late. So
thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, so briefly, I mean, I started out, I don't even know what day it was, so it doesn't matter, but yeah, like last 7 days was interesting. Kind of got to see, both not only in the news cycle, but like on the ground, just kind of a disparate group of people as it relates to this conversation. Went out on, I think it was Tuesday, but I remember I went out to 2 cities in one day, and then I finally settled in Austin, but I was in LA, and Larry Namer and I, who you guys know, were speaking along with Scott Page from Pink Floyd, who I know you know, Travis, and Zachary Jaden on a panel called NFTs in the Metaverse, the Future is Now at the Family Office Investment Summit, the 17th annual Family Office Investment Summit, which is about 200 family office professionals, people that manage I don't know, a couple $100 billion worth of assets across a portfolio of different things.
That's no big deal. It's no big deal. Only a couple $100 billion. It's not something.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably, I don't know all the different family offices that were there, but it was, so it was kind of a totally different crowd than maybe the normal Web3 crowd, obviously. But smart money and people that were, learning about everything from private debt markets to, real estate to everything in between. And so we were on this panel after, I don't remember, it sounded like Charlie Brown's Teacher, but we were on this panel right after something that was like super technical and like, and so we kind of looked at each other. We're like, well, this is going to be interesting because, we're going to either lighten this up or we're going to get kicked out. It'll be an interesting panel, because we were kind of in there looking definitely different than the rest of the audience members and people on stage. So it was really good, though. We kind of set the takeaway was, it was really enlightening for, I think, a lot of folks. The panel was about 35 minutes. We went about an hour and 5. I mean, the Q&A and everything. So it was right before a break, which was nice. So the organizers did a great job with that because it kind of gave enough air where people that wanted to ask questions could. So it couldn't have gone any better. I think, one of the biggest takeaways was I was trying to figure out how to communicate to, people that may or may not really know what this space is. Obviously, everybody's heard of an NFT, no matter where they are, because you can't not. But there's a lot of stigma around it. There's a lot of confusion around it. The whole, is it just a JPEG thing? So the takeaway that I think was cool was I came up with a new way of saying this, that there's essentially 3 layers, right, of the token economy. There's 3 layers of the next global economy. One is the productivity layer. And this is where technologies like AI, 3D printing, robotics, like these things that we've heard of, this is where they live, right? So in the productivity layer, it's where we make stuff. And then I said, there's the digital layer, the digital asset layer. This is where we move stuff, right? So like in the physical world, like we put it on cargo ships and we ship it all over the place. In the digital world, we wrap it in containers, NFTs. We put identities around it, decentralized identity or centralized identity, but we put a digital identity around it. And so this is where those things live. And then there's the consumption layer, which we talked about was like the human layer. And in the human layer is where Metaverse and some of these other experiences live, AR, VR, XR, these things where we consume, and we do that through a multitude of different parallels, both in real life and also in the metaverse or the multiverse. And if you think about metaverse, that could be just a collection of three-dimensional websites. So we kind of level set them that way. And then we talked about how blockchain, a couple of years ago was all the rage. Everybody was investing in it, ICOs, blah, blah, blah. Then the bubble burst. And now everybody thinks like, oh, blockchain, is it really necessary, whatever. But how AI, which everyone had heard of, we said, how many of you have, done ChatGPT or heard of ChatGPT? They all raised their hand. How many of you have actually used it? And surprisingly, more than 2/3 of the audience raised their hand, right? So when I said, how many of you bought an NFT? It was like one, right? Out of the whole audience. When I said, how many of you have tried ChatGPT 4, or ChatGPT, it was like 2/3 of the audience, right? So I said, great. So what you have to understand is through the productivity layer, manufacturing layer, and human layer, that force function, that amount of activity is going to bring to light the need for blockchain. So it was kind of like an interesting frame to help them understand how these things sometimes unlock each other and how AI was going to do that. So
I think right there, Chris, that is its own, like we should maybe do that as a show for FinTech, as we're, this is kind of our pre-show, guys, when you're tuning in and you're saying, hey, this is, what are they thinking about? Because we're kind of working through some of the ideas here on that. But Chris has just identified a really interesting sort of a way to describe the digital economy now, right? It's like having those three different types of layers. So maybe that's what we cover in that next part there, Mr. Snow.
Could be. I think it was a good frame for people to kind of, again, this was a room of smart money, so they understood it. So we're trying to make it relatable to stuff they already know and understand.
Yeah.
Well, actually, many times in my space, in a lot of our leadership meetings, business meetings, we've been talking about blockchain for so many years. You're right. People are still saying, what's that? Right? I mean, NFT, what's that? Right? They can't seem to put a hand on it. And then when you ask them about AI and ChatGPT, everyone has tried it. 99% has tried it. And if you haven't tried, you're like you're not living in this world, right? They glare at you, say that's impossible. You haven't tried it yet, right? So I think, I don't know, maybe because ChatGPT was able to make it fungible or make it people can really relate to it, and it's a very clear use case that people were. You have a question, ChatGPT will answer it for you. It's very much like how Google does it in search, except it's more interesting because you ask a question or you give ChatGPT a task, and they'll just do it for you.
Yeah,
and so this week, also, Donald, yeah,
it also might just be because, like a lot of things, it was easier, sure, you had all the hype around it, but to start using ChatGPT, all you really needed to do was what you were already used to, which was register, right? And put in a username and a password, and then start asking it. I doubt that most of those folks that raised their hand would consider themselves to be very proficient with ChatGPT, meaning like they might have played with it. It may have given them some bad answer or something that wasn't that great. But the point isn't that. I think the point was because we were able to really get them to understand. There was a couple big sports agents in the room that manage everything from pro to college or even high school athletes. And so the topic of NIL, name, image, likeness, came up, right? And we started talking about deep fakes, Travis. Like, I said, look, this is not to go down a rabbit hole of political stuff, because it doesn't matter. In 2024, though, it is probably more likely than not that we will have the ugliest, most divisive election we've ever had in the United States, for no other reason than the tools to inflame that conversation are better than they've ever been, right? Like with deep fakes, and literally like the next day, Jerome Powell is all over the news because some Russian pranksters used, a voice hack to get in a conversation with him, and he thought they were the Ukrainian president, right? Like, so literally, like, as we're talking about this, deep fakes are unfolding in real time and they're on the mainstream media. So I think that's just where we are. Like, people understand. I don't know that, we tried to, keep it light and talk about family offices typically invest over long horizons of time. And so it was a great crowd to kind of go, hey, you look at multi-generational wealth preservation. right? You're not like a hedge, like back in the 80s, 90s, hedge funds were mostly LPs in that were family offices. And so they had a different metric. And then in the late 90s, 2000s, it became more of like a monthly and quarterly type of thing. And so the investor base swapped out, which changed the dynamics of how hedge funds had to invest and operate. So I said, if there was ever a time for family offices to get engaged in these technologies, it's now, because you have to have a long-term horizon of time investment. Like, and if we don't do this, it'll be very bad. Because I said the one thing, this was the line that got him, Travis. I said, the one thing, no matter how rich you are in this room, that you have in common with the most poor person in LA right now is that none of you own your identity. And they were like, huh? Yeah. And I said, you either have an Apple ID or you have a Gmail ID, true or false? And they were like, oh. And so, you know, we talked about, if you start putting AI on top of that level of infrastructure, how we just basically centralize data to a level that we can't undo. And so it was a cool call to action. It was really an interesting crowd. We learned a lot. I think they learned some stuff. It was cool.
I love that. That's good. And you met some interesting people. You have some, I think probably people are leaving that thing going, wow, what were those guys talking about? Because that is some interesting stuff, something to keep the conversation going.
So Donald, you had a big week this week. What did you get up to this week in Web3? You did something for the first time, I think.
Yeah. So I bought my first NFT out of a lot of hype going around here. Gcash, the biggest wallet. It's tied up to Globe, which is one of the biggest telcos here. They partnered with a very popular artist, and they launched 1,000 NFT pieces. And I tell people I'm now divergenized as an NFT collector. So I bought 10 NFTs, basically just for $1,000 for 10 of them, and they coming with it were actually prints, 3 prints of that painting, and I can sell actually immediately the 3 prints for around $1,000. So I technically would have gotten my money back, except of course you hold on to it more and more, and hopefully the price goes up, right? So, but I think it's really priming the market. A lot of people are there. First time I've seen this much people in an event, and they're really pushing the envelope in terms of NFT. Jumping into the sea of NFTs.
So was this in Manila? Where was this? And was it an auction?
It was in Manila. It was in Manila. Yeah, that's right, in Makati. So they even had to do the event in an art place, in an art gallery. So it's very interesting, because you get the feel and the vibe is there, and then you have the tech and everything is there. So again, it's a lot of people talking about it, basically talk of the town for a week, and even if you're like me, I haven't really gotten into the feel of buying an NFT. So you have a lot of people there helping you. Okay, you haven't bought one. Okay, I'm here, step by step, right? And do this, right? And we'll help you buy it.
Yeah. So you were in an art gallery, and the artist was there. Were they displaying the actual physical prints in the collection? And then you were buying. Yep. You said you bought 10 for 1,000. So were you getting like a pack, or did you pick individually 10? How did they like?
No, you can't. So it's randomly. It's theoretically randomly sent to you, sent to your wallet. So you can choose.
Okay, I gotcha. And how many people were there? Just curious. In the actual gallery.
There were almost 100. More, give or take 100, and then you have plus media people. You have some influencers who were there. So it's a very nice event, actually.
What was your taste of, like, how many people do you think that was their first either purchase of art, meaning like maybe they've never bought a piece of art in any form before, or their first NFT, or combination? Like what percentage of that audience do you think this was their first exposure to collecting art at any level?
That's such a good question. I felt I'm the president of the blockchain council here, but I think I'm one of the 10% remaining who hasn't bought anything, and who just did their first purchase. You see a lot of the collectors, the NFT collectors, they've been there, they've been going around. Whenever I go to these events, it's always them. So I think it's not like you get the critical mass going in. I think it's slowly just growing and growing by itself. But you need more events like these so you get more people dipping their feet into NFT purchasing.
Yeah. Hey, Travis, he's back.
Yeah,
Hey,
you
Travis.
get that great internet here in Puerto Rico. Every once in a while, decides it doesn't want to play.
It's hard
So,
after
I think
it's hard after
middle of a
being a kid.
It could have been in the middle of one of Chris's soliloquy, but no, it had to happen whenever I was getting ready to say something. It had to cut out.
Yeah.
So it was really nice.
We love the
I like how that worked.
screenshot. It froze you with your eyes closed. It was
Yep.
great. It was a perfect screenshot. So we're gonna put that on the thumbnail.
Be going this effing internet.
Yeah. So Donald actually had you got the back end of it, but so there was a live auction. It was actually in an art gallery, which is cool. And and it was an NFT drop essentially of a new collection, and the prints included, as well as the digital assets that were part of the purchase. And to summarize, he was he recognized several of the faces there that had probably been collecting or in part of other collections, and part of it, maybe 10% that was new. And I think what's interesting, Donald, is like I was in Miami not too long ago, a couple weeks ago, not this trip, but and I met with Pablo Rodriguez Frel, who's one of the larger collectors in this country of art in general. I think he's got almost 2 or 3 dozen beeples. He's got he's just a very prolific, and he's buying to hold. So a lot of what he's doing is just buying art that he likes, which is what a lot of collectors do, and kind of holding it over a long period of time, not looking to flip. His entire house is basically an NFT. It's pretty incredible. And he was talking about how Beeple does that. Like Beeple does airdrops, but they're actually like physical airdrops. Because he showed me this thing. I can't remember what it was, but it was like this beautiful package, and it was just like really, just really classy. And I was like, "Oh, where'd you get that?" And he goes, "Oh, I got that was one of the airdrops that Beeple did." And I said, like you went to the thing and they like literally dropped it. Like I forget how he did it, but there was this whole thing where like in the gallery they dropped it from the ceiling and like did this play on words. And it's a really cool way to access collectors and new people, and also existing collectors, into this world of physical and digital art.
I'd say this about Beeple: when you've earned about $100 million and selling your artwork at this point, then spending a few G's to drop a cool thing is not bad. So I don't know if you can see this one right here. That is this, it's called, what's it called? It's not an immovable object. It's a hold on, let me read it. Let's go. I'll show you my favorite one of all. It's an infinite object. So look at this right here. This right here is actually an NFT.
Yep.
This is an NFT. It's Kobe, and he is shooting the ball, and he's got a little halo over his head. This is by Boss Logic. I got this on Nifty Gateway. This is one of my favorite NFTs of all time. So much so, there's only like 400 of them in existence. I think I own 3 of them, right? Because it's one of the coolest pieces that I've ever seen. And for you to display it, it's so amazing. I love this piece. And one thing that's interesting about that time with NFTs is that file right there, it's not high res. Like I don't have a high res version of that one. It's kind of a low res. For the amount that I spent on it, I can't show it on this one right here. This is an NFT monitor. Well, I can show NFTs, but I can't really show it well on here because it becomes like small. So I think that's part of the problem too with NFTs, is that especially with Bitcoin ordinals that are popping up now, is that the larger the file size, the more that it actually costs for you to even put it on. What's cool about it, it's want to take the full 4 megabytes of that block and make an NFT out of it. You can. It's happened one time. And it costs a few $1,000s to do, right? And so blockchain, so actually you're eating up Satoshis on that, or on the ordinal chain. But on something like Ethereum, like that, they could have put that bigger file on IPFS or uploaded it on a Pinata or something, so I could have a much larger file. So that's where there's a problem with some of that early NFT type of stuff, is that the resolution of those files aren't as big as they're going to get, and just because some of that stuff can't fit on chain.
Well, that's an interesting segue back to the second part of so I was in LA for like 5 hours, did the talk, jumped back to the airport, went to Austin, landed at Austin late in basically a tornado, and then woke up next morning, it was beautiful, and went out and was at an event with the Arweave ecosystem in the afternoon that day. And why I bring that up is, Travis, is that it was called Permapalooza. For those who haven't followed Arweave, they came to be in, I think, 2017. And essentially what they're building is the permaweb, right? So it's this idea that right now, what most people don't realize is the current state of the internet that we have is not permanent either, right? I mean, it's stored on servers, but at the end of the day, IPFS and other incentive mechanisms store files based on an incentive that says if someone's looking at it often, right? So virality and things like that. Swarm protocol is kind of like the concept. And so what that means is that if it's a cat video or if it's something that has a ton of hits, then it kind of stays worth keeping on your server as a node because you're getting paid for it. But if it's something that maybe only 2-3 people a year care about, right, which is going to be most in a lot of NFTs, especially once we get into the industrial web and things like that, there's no real reason to keep it, right? Because it's taking up space. Right. There's not a lot of activity.
One person cares about it, the person who owns it.
But here's the problem.
Multiple people
right?
are going to care about it.
But here's the problem. When we talk about, knowledge, or we talk about journalism, or we talk about truth, we talk about research papers like the New England Journal of Medicine, those things are not cat videos. Those things are not highly swarmed. Sure, there might be doctors that reference them. They might be, but the fact from like the current state of the internet is somewhere around 2/3. When we wrote Digital Sense, Travis, we covered this. Almost 2/3 of source material, because a lot of source material in a bibliography now is a link instead of just like a Dewey Decimal. 2/3 of source material goes to a 404 and found record on the internet because the link is no longer there. Well, NFTs face a different version of that because the decentralized, world is saying if it, is worth looking at, then we'll compensate you. If not, you're not making any money on that. So people will clean their server off. Arweave came to be to basically say that's a problem for a couple of reasons. One, censorship, obviously, right? Because if I put something up and it can be taken down, then it's not permanent. And that's a way to suppress these things we don't want to see suppressed. The other thing was, if it's research, if it's knowledge, if it's digitized versions of some of the things we've learned over 10,000 years of recorded history, but it's not a cat video, well, then we might lose it for other incentives. So the permaweb is really there to help store high volume at velocity. So back to your point, one of the things that it does is it allows for files and things that are minted that are of high, and the rule sets and the metadata and that to be stored on chain, where they could be minted anywhere. They could be minted elsewhere on, ETH or on XLS. And then the storage component of it is where the NFT actually points. The NFT is the locator and says that's where the asset is. The asset is on Arweave, and therefore it's permanent, and it's got a 200-year life right now. They figured out the cost of storage over time. And so our drive and some of the other folks were there. It was really, really interesting and fascinating to see kind of what's happening in that ecosystem. So definitely wanted to look at.
Yeah, actually with Bad Crypto, Bad Media Group that we have an NFT a club essentially, and if you sign up, it's like 0.002 ETH, and so it's like $3.60 or something to sign up to get this thing. That's the total fees. But then all of our NFTs, well, we're working them through Matic, but those NFTs are stored on Arweave, right? So it's like you can go. And then, but they do compress them they have a really unique compression engine apparently, because you can tell that they're taking that and they're compressing it down. Like our membership is a spinny membership card. You can see all sides of it, but it's definitely artifacts on there. So, but that's sort of the deal is where it's going to be on there for 200 years. That's about as long as you would need for an NFT. I mean, that's a big long time frame right there. And if it's needed longer, then they'll probably be able to do it longer, assuming we can still access the internet 200 years from now. It's like I remember this quote. I think it was Albert Einstein said this. He goes, "I don't know what kind of weapons are going to be used in World War III, but World War IV will be sticks and stones." And so hopefully we don't go too far.
I'm gonna beat you with my bare hands.
Yeah, we're gonna go back to Og days. Og. So that's interesting. So one of the things that I worked on this week. So my week in Web3 was so I told you guys a couple of weeks ago about Cornytopia and how that's built out. Well, I got a book deal. I signed a book deal with Book.io, and this is going to be a featured book with them. Thank you. One of the very first times, actually, I think the very first time a book has been an NFT that has been distributed by the chapter. Nobody's done this. The only person that I can find that has done this was Charles Dickens back in the day, where he would literally sell his book by the chapter. He would sell it 2 and 3 chapters at a time, and then they would have to come in and pay a shilling to get that book. And then he would actually sell the book 3 times. He would do it in that first way, and he would sell it as by the chapter. Then he would sell a paperback version of that, and then you could get all of those and combine it as a hardbound version of that. And so I think that's a really cool way to do things. Is so when you buy the NFT, you're going to get that first chapter. You can read the first chapter with your kids. A week, 2 weeks later, boom, you're going to get that second one, and that original NFT is going to get updated, right? That's never been done before. So it's like, as a first, it's like, basically, I kind of liken it to, guys, of maybe an album. You know, when an album would do a single and they release a single for it, it's like, basically, we're releasing a single from the book, and it's that first chapter, and then get you hooked. And so, and actually, Charles Dickens was the guy who invented the cliffhanger. And it's called the cliffhanger because of Charles Dickens. He would say at the end of that chapter, you need to have a hook where somebody's hanging on the edge of a cliff with their fingernails, and you don't know what's going to happen. And so next, you want to make sure that they tune in and get that next chapter. So he was basically sort of taking that Netflix, you know, that model streaming media as a book. So I would say Charles Dickens was one of the most innovative authors of all time. And actually, while he was alive, he made almost $70 million while he was alive in the 1800s. So if you can think about how wealthy and successful of an author, $60-70 million in 2023 is still a significant amount of money. So $60-70 million back in 1880 or whatever, like that's just an obscene amount of money. That's almost $1 billion probably in that money. So, you know, emulating some of the things that worked for him, and we're taking it into the NFT space. And when I thought of it, I hadn't even thought about what Dickens had done until someone had mentioned it. And so then I went down the Dickens rabbit hole and was like, wow, this dude has done all kinds of amazing stuff. And so that's going to be emulated in the NFT space.
You know, it goes back to that thing. Nothing's new, just new ways to apply old ideas. But that's a perfect example of, you know, kind of, again, getting to market, knowing your customer, giving them kind of what they want, where they can get into the game. I mean, not a lot of artists, certainly not a lot of writers at that time, especially, nor publishers, were able to monetize at that level. I had no idea that he had earned that much money. I mean, usually you hear about these people and it's like, oh, when they're grandkids, then the Van Gogh sells for 400 million or whatever, but they were broke, right? And you know, Dickens obviously wasn't broke. That's really cool.
He was not.
History.
Yeah, and well, one of the things that I think I'm doing on this that nobody's actually done before is the fact that, well, we're selling it by the chapter. However, the community, if you own the NFT, the community is able to vote on the direction of the chapters as they're being written. It's like, do you want us to do this or should we do that? And then, so what's cool is of the people who can be in the Discord now, there's about 70 total people in the Discord, but only like 100 people have the NFT, right? So of those 100 that have the NFT, of those, only 27 of them voted on the direction of chapter 3. And so what I did was I went through on our Discord, we have it set up. So if you have the NFT, you can actually vote on it. And then also later on, I opened it up to friends that don't have the NFT. The NFT is not for sale. People aren't selling on the secondary market. There's only been one that's gone up on the secondary market, and somebody snagged it pretty quickly. So he has access to that. But so of those, 27 people voted. Of those, 17 people voted 5 times or more. And so I went through and calculated all the reactions on the post and who voted when and what. So those 17 people, they each now have 1/1000th of the franchise. I gave them an NFT that represents 0.1% of the total franchise. So whatever money comes in from this franchise, giving away 1.7% to these NFT holders who have not spent $1 on our franchise at all. But what they have done is they've spent their attention, they've spent their focus, and they've spent their support on this. And so I'm rewarding those people, and they've not paid me $1. Well, they have paid to get the membership to the Bad Crypto Nifty Club for $3. And then if they claimed it, if they actively went in and claimed Captain Corn, that was what triggered this whole Cornutopia Kingdom. And then those initial 10 corn wizards that went out to those people. Then the idea started going, wait a second, well, I need to have some women, corn wizards, and I need to have some people of color corn wizards. And I started thinking like, well, which countries make the most corn? It's like, oh, well, America makes the most corn. America makes over 350 million megatons of corn every year. Second on the list is China. China does 275 million megatons of corn. Then you got, Mexico and Ukraine and Russia and Canada and South Africa and some of these other countries out there. Yeah, so America has 350 plus million megatons of corn they produce every year. China has like 275 million megatons. I got a list here. It's like, and then it's Brazil, 130.
Is a megaton more than an ass load? Is a megaton more than
it's two mega ass loads, which is good. So it's a million tons, not a megaton. It's a million tons, 300 million tons. European Union, 59 million tons. Argentina, 55 million tons. Ukraine, 31 million tons. Mexico, 27 million tons. South Africa, 17 million tons. Russia, 15 million tons. Canada, also about 15 million tons. So much corn is being created, and these different industries are, it's worldwide. So in America, there are a few corn industries that are just ginormous. And so one of the things now is I'm exploring some of the areas there. Or dude, I might turn into the corniest guy when it's all said and done, guys.
You definitely will. Hey, I just thought of something, Travis. You should consider locking up the ticker for whatever the tokens are. A ton. You should have like the derivatives are like kernels, but then tons is like the currency or something, so that you can basically be like, I gave you a ton, right? Like here's a ton of corn.
Here's a megaton of corn, which is 2 ass loads, as we know. So that's good. And so one of the things that's been so fun about this whole thing, we talked about ChatGPT, we've talked about NFTs, talked about your journey this week, Chris, about how you went to these multiple places and was talking about some of these things. I tell you what, as you mentioned early on this thing, that productivity layer, the ability to get stuff out of ChatGPT now is insane. I saw this video last night with Matt Wolf, he's putting out a lot of great content about AI. And he says, I found the very best ChatGPT prompt that you would ever need. And the prompt is this: what are the most absolute coolest, most mind-blowing, out of the box ChatGPT prompts that will really show off the power of ChatGPT? Give me 10, right? And so I typed that. I got a bunch of different ones, like create a dialogue between famous historical figures like Einstein and Newton, discussing a modern scientific breakthrough and how it would have impacted their own work. Create an gripping opening scene for a novel set in a dystopian future where the world is powered by unknown energy source and humans have developed psychic abilities, et cetera, et cetera. Internet here in Puerto Rico. Well, the problem is I got concrete walls. And so the internet, even I got a mesh network rolling through here, sometimes it just acts stupid. And so when I'm down here, it acts a little ridiculous. But anyways, the point is ChatGPT with your project, no matter what you're working on, there are ways that you could say, what are the most absolute coolest, mind-blowing ChatGPT prompts for small business investment firms, right? For this. And you're like, so you can literally go out, tell it to do certain stuff, and it's going to generate you the most highly important and effective little ChatGPT prompts that you can then copy, paste right back into ChatGPT and get yourself some of the most ridiculous. Dude, some of the stuff that I got back here from this thing was just unbelievable. It's like it gave me a prompt. Oh, design a match 3 game set in a magical cornfield where players must match different varieties of corn to unlock special power-ups, create spectacular combos, and progress through increasingly challenging levels. Include unique features like corn-based spells, seasonal challenges, and collectible corn-based characters. So I take that, I highlight it, boom, I paste it in ChatGPT all by itself, boom. Now it's going to generate over 4,000 characters as it describes what this game would look like, that I could then hire a mobile development team to make this badass thing for me.
Nice. Wow.
Seriously, that's the productivity level, Chris. That's the ability to take that, turn that into something. That's not even Web3. I'm taking this to turn this into Web2, because I think Web2 and using those features that are already there, are already used by these people, to level that up. That's where the big money, I think, is combined. We're kind of in Web 2.5 world, really.
Well, that was a topic that came up, is that the conversion, the bridge between 2 and 3 is really more about where the center of control exists as it relates to the ownership level or the data proxy level. And that's a different thing than making stuff and moving stuff. Now, ultimately, when we make stuff and move stuff, it's important to have provenance to it, because the more powerful tools like this that you're mentioning that we can use to make stuff, the more bad stuff and more fake stuff we can put out there, right? We can create fraud and disinformation and knockoffs at a clip much faster than.
Oh my God. And I really want to touch base on that.
So
it's so true. It's like, just for example, of using AI, you should really have a safe word with your family of saying, hey, because if somebody's calling my wife or calling my mom and they're using AI of my voice, and something's bad happened to me, they're going to believe it because they hear my voice, but it might not be your voice. It could be AI using your voice. So people doing nefarious things, Chris, is something that's really needs to be thought about.
Yeah. And, like we talked about this at the family office thing a little bit, which was that, media companies, like there's no right time to enter, but one thing is for sure is there will be a time where it's too late. And then you're playing catch up in a way that is almost maybe not like that likely. And, with media companies, it's really important with at scale, because again, we still rely on, we need some sense of understanding what's going on out there, and we still rely on these institutions that kind of exist, and we're gonna rely on them until we figure out the next level of institution. But no matter what that transition of data ownership and things looks like, at the end of the day, the IP, because you're inventing IP, Donald just consumed some IP. These are the kind of groundswell opportunities. But let's say you're a major whole portfolio of IP. How do you protect that investment, right? Like KKR and BMI spent, I think, $500 billion or something last year rolling up IP, everything from Bruce Springsteen's Masters to whomever. They're not necessarily taking it out to market yet, because they may not know a business model yet that makes sense, but they know that at some point somebody's going to figure it out, whether it's you, Travis, or somebody like you. And so they're just holding onto the IP. But in this world where we're now able to write music, we're able to knock stuff off. You're creating Beatles albums, like all this stuff. At some point, the litigation over the next 2 years is going to be tremendous. So lawyers will get rich. But consumers won't be able to tell the difference, right, between their friend's voice or between that video that has someone they like in it, whether they're doing something good, bad, or indifferent. So we talked a lot about, even with college kids, like these kids signing NIL deals where they're making all their money in Web2. There's 2 gals that play basketball that are twin sisters out of, I think, Kentucky or one of the schools near where you came from. And, they're making like $1.7 million a year off of their NIL deal, right? And they're like juniors, and they're great athletes. They're all American, but they're also targets now, right? They have a following. They can be used to manipulate stuff. And so this notion of like replacing the blue check with something that is owned by the actual brand, the personal brand, or the manager of the brand, or whatever it is, so that there's this ability to take these Web2 platforms where they have the audience, but provide some level of certainty that you're hearing from Chris or Travis or Donald, and then start as the migration from 2 to 2.5 to 3 goes, to be able to create a provenance level that says, oh, I can trust that because that is immutable. That is definitely from, that was minted on, you know, a chain and like stamped by the person who created it. And that's one of the companies that was.
Well, let me add this is that, say, for example, you got 1 point something million followers on Instagram, and then all of a sudden you piss off Instagram because you say something that Instagram doesn't deem as an appropriate opinion. Boom, you lose all 1 point whatever million followers. You don't own them anymore. Instagram owns your audience. You don't own it. YouTube owns your audience. You don't own it. You know, Twitter owns your audience. You don't own it. So as we get into this, it's like, you know, those NFTs, I think, are key because it's a proof that you're part of that community. And tools like Uncut are then able to go out and say, oh, these are all the people that have this NFT. Here's the community. So a community could be distributed function. It doesn't matter how many NFTs are in that collection, but that is an indicator to a community platform that you can then import your community. Whereas before, you could never do that. No. And that, I think, is such a key element, is people don't own their communities. And when they decide to shut you off, they will. So find a way around that. Digitally, distributedly, decentralized is through an NFT, some sort of non-fungible asset.
Wow. Yeah. No, we're very much, Asia is very much platform centric, right? So that's going to be a major shift from our side. I mean, we talk about media companies, and you're seeing already a lot of massive layoffs happening. The creative side, the copywriting side, anything that has to do with the creation of IPs, all the way to the mechanical work that has to be done. So even when you look at organizations, they have to make major adjustments on the org structure, on how they do their financial models, on the business itself, right? And at the same time, you're talking about, yeah, correct, on the platforms. We're seeing a lot still. If anyone is still working on a Web2 social networking platform, that's going to be, you're too late in the game already, right? So everything is going to this side of the fence.
Well, and I think a lot of jobs in Southeast Asia, a lot of jobs in the Philippines, especially, Donald, are, outsourced jobs related to social media management, creation, things like that. And I know you were saying that recently, like one of the larger BPO, business process organizations out there, which is a big segment of your economy, was kind of working on leveling up everybody's ability with ChatGPT 4, right? So now literally, trying to almost defensively and offensively train up their skill base for some of these productivity layer pieces. How do you think and see that playing out? You've been in media and you've been in kind of traditional media organizations.
No, one of the more, Chris, I've been getting so many phone calls from banks already, whether it's going to update you on your credit card that you have paid, or that's due already, or a new promotion, and they talk like a human, but they're not, right? So eventually you're going to, I was so surprised that it was only after 3 minutes of talking to that person on the other line that it wasn't a person. They sound like a human person already until I asked a very specific question and said, please hold. so right. That's the robot there.
I love it. It's crazy.
Yeah, I had to do that.
It's one of those things where it's like that's why you guys are tuning in. If you're still listening to this now, like, you're in the small percentage of people trying to figure this stuff out, and a lot of people are maybe not doing that. So in a house full of family office investors, 2/3 of the people have tried ChatGPT. Not everybody's using ChatGPT to its fullest. There's so many different things that could be utilized, so many of these technologies that aren't being explored yet. And so if you're one of the people that are on it and you're testing it and you're trying it out, experimenting, consider yourself, one of those who are doing it, and you want to try to figure it out, because a lot of people aren't going to figure it out, and it's going to create this haves versus the have-nots. Artificial intelligence is going to widen the gap of equity. It's not going to bridge the gap. It's going to make it way worse. And so you got to pay attention. If you're not paying attention, you're going to get left behind. And what happens to those who get left behind? They're sad. and then they're mad at those who had the foresight to not get left behind.
Yeah, one of my favorite movies was Hidden Figures, which was all about the African American women that were part of basically NASA at a time where segregation existed, and literally they were the computational mathematicians or playing key roles that came up with the formula that allowed us to land on the moon. And had they not been there, we wouldn't have been able to land on the moon. The mission wouldn't have worked. And it's great.
That's assuming that we landed on the moon.
Well, yeah, assuming. But
Stanley Kubrick might say something different about that, but I think it's debatable.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, the math was real. So, you know, the point of that was there's a scene in it where the one woman, and I can't remember her name now, but the one woman is kind of running. She's like the manager of the compute team, and the compute team at that time was people with, you know, like there was no calculator, so they were like doing everything by hand, right? But they were human computers. And they were doing all
and the slider thing they used to have.
Yeah, with the slide rule and everything. And she was managing that team, and they were in the room, and the mainframe, they had just bought an IBM mainframe, like big old IBM mainframe computer, and they were loading in the paper and the dot. And it was all like, you know, and none of and her white counterparts come in, whoever the senior manager was, they come in, and she realizes through this conversation that they don't really know how the mainframe works because it was running on Fortran, which was a form of code, right? So they didn't know how Fortran really worked. So they kind of knew what it was, and they were like, don't touch it. So again, she said to herself, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to become the smartest person I can at Fortran. Because if they just spent all this money on this big computer that takes up a whole room, and they don't know how to run it, whoever knows how to run it can't be fired, regardless of their color. And again, back to that, you know, that foresight was, this is an end around too, right? So as much as it'll be, you know, a have and have not worse generator, like it'll generate a bigger gap in some ways, it's also going to create an opportunity for people that have been held back in the other systems, or maybe haven't had their chance. If they're willing to become and learn, this becomes a window of time where they can end run kind of the status quo. They can almost, regardless of whatever's held them back before, their social class, their skin color, their religion, they can become someone very valuable because they understand how to work with this technology in a way that's productive. So, you know, those are it's the interesting things that we live in right now, is that it's back to meritocracy, and it'll be back to kind of who can do what. And at the end of the day,
don't matter your gender, doesn't matter your race, doesn't matter your age, doesn't matter your nationality. Can you do it or can you not do it? And with these tools, they can augment anyone to be able to do anything. You just have to be in the game. If you ain't in the game, then you ain't going to do it. But if you're in the game, you have a chance to create some really big things. Because you could, like, just for example, Chris, earlier we were talking about this. So here's some of the things that I devised for a small family office focused on investments. Devise a revolutionary investment framework that combines artificial intelligence and human expertise to identify long-term investment opportunities for a family office. Boom, you take that into ChatGPT. So it generated 10 prompts like this that I could then put in to ChatGPT to see which one of these investment firms investment opportunities makes the most sense. What I think about ChatGPT, guys, is it's the very best brainstorm buddy you've ever had. Because if you just want to think about something, it's the best super intelligent assistant that I've ever had. And I'm like, hey, I want to know this. Boom. Boom. There it is immediately. So I don't have to wait 2 days to get this data back for me to do the next step. I can do the next step now. And that's what's always held me back, I think, is that I've not had a supercharged assistant who can help do some of those things while I'm trying to think, you know, mastermind things and sort of mad scientist it. This makes me the best case mad scientist that I could possibly be. And it's probably got to be scary for some, how powerful that you can become by using and augmenting some of these super intelligent interfaces.
Yeah. One more thing to check out. I haven't played with it yet, so I can't really vouch for it, but I saw it on my flight home, was finchat.io. finchat.io is essentially for reading quarterly reports and running analysis on up-to-date quarterly reports. So unlike ChatGPT, which was trained up until I think 2021 on its large language model, there's now this FinChat application is kind of, I think, uploaded as current as like last quarter. So now you can basically have prompts that say, look at the last 8 quarters of Microsoft's 10K and look for discrepancies, or tell me, whether I should buy, sell, or hold, and give me a thesis for it. And now it's like literally reading, the circulars of all these publicly traded companies and giving you an analysis. So, Philippines and markets like it, Donald, I think are very smart to, realize there's going to be a transitional bridge here. There's going to be an outsourced play here. If they can have the best trained teams on how to implement some of these workforce improvements and these productivity level improvements, they can kind of be part of that gap fill while companies are downsizing or right sizing kind of in-house talent and still need to kind of create output. There's going to be that gap, maybe a couple year gap, maybe a year and a half gap. Who knows how long it is? Probably a little longer than we think, but it'll happen faster than we think too. Where they can pick up that business and they can continue to serve their clients or even gain bigger scopes on their existing clients because they have an offering around ChatGPT-4 that integrates with their other offerings while they're looking for cost-effective ways to reduce headcount internally. So, these are opportunities that allow markets like the Philippines to maybe find an edge or an angle to level up as well.
In the Philippines, we've been very quick in adopting. I mean, we're very quick to the draw on Axie and crypto. We've been very quick on adjusting to social networking. We're the biggest and largest social networking country on a per capita basis. At the same time, when you talk about ChatGPT, everyone's using it. The big question actually for the BPOs here is that because a lot of our customers are from the US. So if US is low, then the BPO industry is still okay. But if the entire US, the companies there, they're outsourcing a lot of the mechanical, secretarial work, call centers, everything, right? If you do that overnight, you're going to take the entire economy of the Philippines. It will just collapse. Actually.
Yeah, interesting. So I think that was a good wrap up of our week. We'll do this again next week and see what another 7 days yields. This was a pretty hectic one.
Yeah, pretty crazy. So we take this, talk about all the things we talked about. We're going to take snippets out of this, and then we'll see the rest of that on FinTech TV. So I think this is going to have a dual effect. People on FinTech TV are going to come and watch this to see the long form thoughts. People who see this are maybe going to want to see the abbreviated version on FinTech TV. So thanks for tuning in. And if you like that, make sure to click this video or that video, or subscribe over here, up, down, or do the Macarena. Hey, Macarena. It's all good.
Or freeze.
Like.